Hi, welcome to this 10-minute seated exercise routine. We will be doing aerobic exercises, range of motion exercises, and some strength exercises. Starting with the aerobic exercises, here we are with a seated march. Choose your pace for varying your intensity with this move. Obviously, you can see here I'm alternating a march with an arm pump. If you do have some respiratory concerns, you might feel that you need to eliminate the arm pump. Next up is a cross punch. Again, if you do have some respiratory concerns, you might feel a little extra out of breath with this move. Go at your own pace. You'll see here I do start to speed up a little bit. This is engaging the core and, of course, increasing the intensity. Slowing down a little just to focus on range of motion. We're going to do a little bit more torso rotation later, but that's just showing you a couple options with increasing or decreasing the rotation with that move. Again, since it's for aerobic purposes, go at your comfortable range of motion and vary your intensity. I'm showing here a modification of a seated jumping jack to a step out. Here is the more advanced version. Again, working on varying your pace to increase your intensity, get your heart rate up, get your effort up, and get your breathing up for these aerobic exercises. Next, we're going into range of motion or flexibility work. Similar to the cross punches, we're starting with a simple torso rotation. Now, this is not for aerobic purposes and more for spinal range of motion. So I want you to keep those hips anchored into the chair and focus on rotating through the spine. You can go nice and slow, spend a little extra time stretching this, or rotate back and forth for about 10 times. This next one is again for spinal mobility, but it's flexion and extension. You're going to extend up with those hands up towards the ceiling, again within your comfortable range of motion, flexing down towards the floor, reaching the toes or the floor if you can, or if your flexibility is a little limited here, just reaching to the knees or the shins is fine. Next up is a knee extension with a hamstring stretch. So here you are going to feel those quadriceps, the top of your thigh muscle, activating. As you straighten that leg, you should feel a little bit of a hamstring stretch. Now here I'm alternating sides after about 5 reps each side. You can also hold that position, making sure you aren't rounding or slumping your spine. You want to get a little bit of a stretch in that hamstring. Your quads might fatigue a little bit the longer you hold this position, and that's okay. There, I was just demonstrating how the pelvis can tilt if your flexibility is limited. You again just want to make sure that your sits bones are anchored into that chair. Next move is for ankle mobility. These are ankle pumps, heel raises and toe raises. Great for improving circulation, helping some swelling, and just really making sure we've got good flexibility at the ankle joint. Next is an overhead reach with a side bending stretch. If you are not able to reach your arms fully overhead due to any shoulder mobility issues, that's okay. The focus here is on that side bend stretch. So if your arms aren't all the way up, that's okay. Just focus on that side bending of the spine. So keep those hips anchored in the chair and really focus on connecting shoulder to the same side hip as you crunch side to side. Again, you can go nice and slow with these as we are focusing on mobility. You can work on deep breathing here as well, expanding through the rib cage. Next, we're going into one of my favorites. This is a piriformis stretch, also known as a figure 4 stretch. I'm going to demonstrate this in 2 different positions for each leg. Here is the typical figure 4 stretch with the knee wide out to the side, anchoring those hips. This next modification is pulling the knee up towards that opposite shoulder. So you see I do get a little bit of a spinal rotation with that. Everybody's a little different with how they prefer to do this stretch and where you can feel a deeper stretch. But this is a great stretch for some of those hip rotators and opening up those hips. A lot of people get hip pain and sciatic pain. This can be comforting for that. Again, there's that modification. Play around with this one, see what feels best for you. Ideally, if you do get a deep stretch here, try to hold that stretch for about 30 seconds if you can. Otherwise, you can just gently move in and out of that stretch. Last but not least, strength exercises. I am using dumbbells. Of course, if you are going to use weights, please start with light weights to see how you do. You can also do this with just your body weight, especially good for beginners working through range of motion. First move here is a shoulder press, pressing overhead. Anchor those hips in, engage the core, and work within your range of motion. For each of these strengthening exercises, I am doing just about 8 repetitions. I encourage you to work 8 to 12 repetitions. If this feels too easy for you, you can increase the weights, or you can pause here, do increased repetitions, or when this video ends, you can rewind and do a couple more sets of just the strength circuit to get a little bit of fatigue in those muscles. So after that bicep hammer curl, now you see lateral raises, working the shoulder muscles. I am palms down on this move. You are going to want to stop right at shoulder height when those hands hit shoulder height. If this is uncomfortable for you or you feel any kind of impingement in the shoulder, I'd like you to bring those hands forward and maybe turn those thumbs up and do a slightly different version of a shoulder exercise. Next, you're going to see a bent over row. So this exercise can be done a few different ways. Here I have more of a narrow grip, pulling those weights up towards my rib cage, squeezing the back muscles. You really want to work on making sure you have a nice long spine there and that you're not rounded forward or hunched. Again, that was about 8 repetitions of that bent over row. Next is a resisted hip abduction. So if you do not have an elastic loop like this, you certainly can do this with just actually putting your hands on the outsides of your knee, creating your own resistance. Will actually give you a little bit of upper body work as well. You can use a belt as well. It won't stretch, but that will create an isometric exercise as you press outward against the belt. These resistance loops are pretty inexpensive, can be purchased online or at a lot of different fitness stores. They come in packs. Typically 9 inches or 12 inches. 12 inches will meet most of your needs for those loops. And again, that was about 8 repetitions of the hip abduction move. This last move, I'm going to show a modification. It is a reclined reverse crunch. So I am leaning back against the chair, holding onto the chair for support. Engage the core. Here I'm doing a modified version where I'm only lifting one leg at a time. My heels are starting on the floor. And then here is the more advanced move where I'm pulling both knees up at the same time. I do touch my heels down between each repetition, and even further advancement of this would be to keep your heels off the floor the entire time, meaning that core is constantly engaged. It's a reverse crunch because rather than lying on the floor and sitting up, we are reclined and we are pulling those knees upward. So still working the abdominal muscles. And that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed that. I encourage you to try to repeat this a couple times per week.